to see the teddy bear are here to play. If you don't come play with us, then we will kill you.
Ellie placed down the plate of cookies on the coffee table as the kids played by the TV. They were momentarily distracted by the chocolate chip sweetness before resuming fighting over who gets to play with a stuffed elephant and who has to play with the plastic dinosaur. Ellie smiled as she sat down on the couch and watched the kids. Most teens her age hated kids and only babysat for the extra pocket cash. But Ellie loved little kids, specifically babysitting them. It always came with the funnest scenarios and silliest stories. Not to mention, the pay was, in fact, pretty good. "Hey, remember to take turns," Ellie said sweetly. "Jane, you already played with the elephant. Now we need to give Taylor a chance to play with it, okay?" Jane begrudgingly gave Taylor the toy elephant. She was bitter for a moment, but soon they began playing like before. Ellie relaxed into the couch, but just then the phone rang. She sighed and answered it, standing up and stepping away from the living room. "Yes, who is this?" Ellie asked. "Is Mrs. or Mr. Peters there?" Ellie hesitated. They didn't reply to her question, and she didn't recognize the voice. But they seemed pleasant. "I am afraid they stepped out for a moment. Can I leave a message?" "When will they be returning?" Not until later tonight." "Is there a message you'd like me to leave?" The phone clicked. Ellie glanced down at the phone with furrowed brows. She shrugged and went back to the living room to put the phone back. "All right, kids, it's almost time for—" Before Ellie could finish her sentence, a sound came from the backyard. She paused and looked to the back door, but the kids didn't seem to notice. Ellie picked up the remote and muted the TV. Luckily, the kids were too preoccupied with the toys to care. She listened intently as she quietly made her way to the back door. She stared out the door at the inky night, trying to find any signs of movement, but she couldn't see anything. Her fingers inched toward the light switch, and her breathing grew heavier. The cool plastic of the switch sent a shiver up her hand and down her spine. She quickly flicked the switch, flinching, as if expecting to see some horrific display when the light came on. But the backyard was empty, nothing to cause the noise. Ellie sighed. She must have been imagining things. She started her way back to the couch when a loud knocking came from the front door. Ellie jumped, snapping her head towards the front of the house. She let out a slow breath. Her nerves were on end. She walked to the front door and looked out the small window by it. She saw a figure on the other side of the door, but she couldn't tell who it was. She hesitantly unlocked the door and opened it. "Hello?" "Hello," the figure said in a cheery voice. "Is Mrs. or Mr. Peters home?" Ellie froze. The figure's voice, it was the same as the one on the phone. Ellie forced a small smile, feeling her lips tremble. There was a brief pause. Then Ellie slammed the door shut. The figure tried to throw itself against the door, but Ellie was quick and locked it. She ran to the living room to the children, but as she did, she saw someone at the back door. They locked eyes for a moment. Ellie ran to the back door just as the person tried to open it. She slammed her body weight against the door, knocking the person back. She locked the door and shut the inside light off so they couldn't see inside. "Ellie, what's happening?" Ellie turned to the kids, their faces illuminated by the TV. She hesitated for a moment, then quickly ran to them, standing them up. The person at the back door started pounding at the glass. Ellie jumped at the sound, dragging the kids to the hallway. "Okay, listen very carefully," Ellie said, getting down to their level. "I need you guys to go hide, somewhere no one can find, okay?" "Like hide and seek?" Taylor asked through tears. Ellie forced a smile. "Yes, just like hide and seek. Now go." She gave them a little shove, and they ran down the darkened hallway hand in hand. Just then, Ellie heard the back door shatter. She turned to the living room to see the man stepping through the now shattered back door. Ellie dashed toward the front of the house, but stopped when she watched the first person from before kick in the front door. They wore one of those ghost masks, like from the movie Scream, and held a butcher knife. The man from the back door appeared behind her, and he wore a Joker mask, wielding a baseball bat. "Boo!" Scream Mask growled. Ellie looked between the two of them, feeling her heart race. She dove into the nearby closet. The two men dove after her. She managed to hold the door closed as the men banged against it. Ellie didn't know how long she stayed there, holding the door closed. It was long after the men had stopped banging on it, long after they walked away from the door. Her heart raced even as silence filled the house. Her palms sweated, but she continued to hold tight to the doorknob. She listened closely, looking at the light underneath the door. She couldn't see anything, hear anything. She took a deep breath and very slowly, very quietly, turned the knob. She opened it just an inch and peeked out the slit, scanning the hallway for any sign of the men. She couldn't see anything. She backed into the closet, closing the door again. She backed behind the clothes, trying to hide behind them. Her hand brushed against the handle of something and she flinched. She glanced down and saw an axe leaning against the wall. She looked back towards the door. Ellie tiptoed down the hallway toward the living room, holding tight to the handle of the axe. As she entered the living room, she noticed a bundle of blankets on the floor that wasn't there before. Her heart skipped a beat, and she almost turned around to run. But the thought of Jane and Taylor came to mind, encouraging her to keep moving forward. Ellie approached the blanket bundle, which started to wiggle and writhe, like a slithering snake was underneath. Her breath hitched as she slowly reached down and gripped the blanket. She pulled it away and lifted the axe. "Jane? Taylor?" Ellie dropped the axe at the sight of the huddled children on the floor. "What are you doing in here?" You told us to hide," Jane said between sobs. "Not in here." Ellie paused, taking a deep breath to try and calm herself. Just then, she heard a floorboard creak from down the hall. Okay. You two stay here," she whispered. "Stay low and stay quiet." The two children laid back down on the ground, holding each other. Ellie quickly but quietly ran to the hallway entrance, leaning her body as close to the wall as possible. She held up the axe, listening carefully as the footsteps crept closer and closer. She held her breath as much as she could, trying to not make any sounds. Her eyes glanced down at the floor, watching the shadow of the person grow bigger as they grew closer. Then they emerged from the hallway. It was the man with the scream mask. Ellie stiffened at the sight of him, making the floorboard creak. The man snapped his head toward her. "Boo!" Ellie swung the axe at him, plunging it into his neck. He didn't get to scream as he collapsed to the floor. Ellie ran towards the back door, yelling at the children to follow her. They got up and together they all ran outside toward the neighbor's house. But they didn't get far. The man with the Joker mask appeared behind Ellie, grabbing her and putting a gun to her head. She let out a scream, making the kids stop and turn to see their babysitter being held by the man. "Keep running!" Ellie tried to scream, but the man pointed the gun at the kids, making her freeze. "Do as I say, and no one gets hurt," the man said in a deep voice. He led Ellie and the kids back into the house. As they entered the living room, he turned his attention back to the kids. "Go to your room, lock the door, and don't you dare come out no matter what," the man ordered. "If you do, I'll kill your little sister here. Got it?" The kids turned to Ellie with large tears rolling down their eyes, and she nodded. They hesitantly made their way down the hall to their bedroom, sobbing and hugging each other. Ellie felt a rush of relief as she heard the door close and lock. She knew they would be safe now. A pinch of panic filled her chest as the man shoved her forward. "Let's make our way to the basement." The man aimed the gun at her back. They walked past the other man on the floor, the axe still stuck in his neck and blood pooling around his body. "What a shame. He was a good friend," the man said in a sarcastic tone. "Why don't we take that with us, too?" With his free hand, the man took the axe out of his partner's neck, then continued to lead Ellie towards the basement door. She kept her hands up, trying to control her breathing. When they reached the bottom of the steps, the man reached out from behind Ellie and pressed the axe handle against her neck, holding her close to his body. She let out a gasp, grabbing at the handle, trying to give her throat some relief. "Oh, don't worry," the man hummed in her ear. "I'll kill you quick." "But those sweet little kids." Ellie felt something snap in her. Her heartbeat quickened, but not from fear. She felt her muscles tense. She stepped on the man's toes as hard as she could and threw her elbow back, hitting him in the ribs. He let out a pained gasp, and Ellie took his shock as an opportunity to push at the axe handle, using her body's momentum to throw him over her shoulders and onto the ground. The impact caused the man's mask to fall off. Ellie didn't recognize the man, but it hardly mattered to her. "It's too bad I had to kill your little friend too quickly," she said, now wielding the axe. "But I get to take my time with you." A cruel grin spread on her lips as she turned the axe in her hands, stepping closer to the man. He put his hands up, fear now written on his face. "Hold on now. Listen," he tried, sounding pathetic. "I don't need to listen to you," Ellie nearly barked. You threatened, hurt my kids. It's my job to keep them safe, and I'm going to do that no matter what. I'm sure the police would understand. You know, a sweet young girl that can barely protect herself, sacrificing herself to protect the kids she swore to babysit. Who can be mad about that? The man sneered. They won't believe you. Oh, Ellie whined, putting on a fake sad face, then smirking again. They always have before. With that, Ellie lifted the axe and swung it down hard.